Greetings, everybody. Hope everybody is extremely well. Hope you are activating and achieving your highest possible level of mental, physical, and spiritual health today on this Sunday. We are so happy to be here with you today for this 89th edition of Our Ancestors' Voices. And we're happy to talk about the topic we have in store for today, why we support the Irish Republican Socialist Struggle, why we African revolutionaries support the Irish Republican Socialist Struggle. That's what we're going to be talking about today, and we're glad you're here to join us for this topic. As always, we start our show by acknowledging our respect for the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, and by indigenous, we mean people who identify as American Indian people, Chicanos, Mexicanos, Puerto Ricanos. We are not talking about anyone else. So if you are not in the descendancy of those people, you are not the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere that we are talking about. Even if you have relatives that have lived here for 1 million years, that reality is not connected to the impression of an entire people whose land was stolen. So that's who we're talking about. And we also give respect and appreciation to the African ancestors who are the very reason that we breathe air today. We are so proud and appreciative for their sacrifices on our behalf. And we ask their patience as we do everything we can to develop our capacity to fight for the Shimaranga, the freedom that they so desperately sacrificed for us to have the opportunity to do. So thank you for being here with us today for this 89th edition of Our Ancestors' Voices. And we will start, as we always do, by just simply introducing who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. So we are not based in America. America is not our primary concern. We are not a party that's running offices in the Democratic or Republican Party. We are adherents to the philosophy of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, when he said, "I'm not a student of politics. I'm not a politician. I'm neither a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American," and got sense enough to know it. We are a revolutionary Pan-African political party based in Africa. Our objective, what we're fighting for, is Pan-Africanism, which we define as one unified socialist Africa, one unified socialist Africa. We believe that Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa achieved, will be the only thing that can fulfill the aspirations of African people and people of African descent living 2 billion strong in 120 countries around the world. We don't believe that we will ever have freedom and justice as long as our mother is disrespected, and our mother is Africa. So we believe that until Africa is free, no African anywhere on earth will ever be free. And so that's our work. And you see on the right, which is the guidebook about our strategy to achieve revolutionary Pan-Africanism. You see the logos of many of the people who are involved in our struggle, and we do continuous work in that regard. And so we just want to also say that Our Ancestors' Voices is the work of myself and daughter, Shakura, and we are both organizers actively in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And we're just so glad that you chose to spend this hour with us. And so to get us started, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much. As I echo my dad, I just want to say that we appreciate you all joining us today. And I'm so excited to talk about today's topic. When am I not excited, right? But this particular topic is near and dear to me because, as we have already stated numerous times, I grew up being a part of the party. My parents were organizing literally before I was born, and I was literally born into organizing. So I grew up with our Young Pioneers Institute, which is a subdivision of the AAPRP dedicated and targeting children who are African, whose parents are involved with the AAPRP, and teaching us about what it means to be African. And so I remember going to African Liberation Day numerous times throughout my childhood. I remember wearing white as a sign of unity. And at African Liberation Day, I remember hearing from comrades who identified with the Irish Socialist Party. So more specifically, my Uncle Peter and my Aunt Mary. And so I just personally want to give a shout out to them because I remembered as a child hearing them speak year after year after year after year. And I always thought it was really cool that they gave their message of solidarity to us as Africans because they, as European people, understood that we as Africans were oppressed. And the whole reason we invited them to come speak at our event is because we, as Africans, understood that they, as Europeans, were oppressed. And so I think in building that solidarity, we also had speakers from numerous indigenous organizations. We had speakers from Asian organizations. Of course, we had Palestinian speakers. This is the message that we've been trying to convey to you all for the last 2 years that we've been doing this seminar, is that we don't just need to organize ourselves, but really anyone who is oppressed needs to be a part of that fight, because a threat to injustice anywhere, as King said, is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So it's really, really important that we understand that we are giving this seminar to support the fact that our comrades who identify with that organization are oppressed. And we understand that it is our responsibility to walk with them in solidarity because they clearly understand it. So yes, you heard us right. We are African revolutionaries who support European white people. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the Irish struggle for freedom and liberation from the British imperialism. And you all should already know specifically that the British invaded and colonized specific countries in Africa. So we take personal offense to that because we too understand what it means for Britain to walk up in our space and tell us what to do. Okay, this is the very reason why you have some countries in Africa that speak English, because the Britain colonized them, whereas you have other countries that speak French and you have other countries that might speak Spanish. So it's very important that we understand not only do we support our Irish comrades because they've been through the woodworks of colonization just as we have, but more importantly, they have some of the same enemies that we too are fighting. So why would we fight them individually when we can join forces and grow a mass movement that's so much larger? So since 1169, the Irish struggle for freedom and liberation has been working to fight against the British. Since 1169, I hope y'all are hearing me right now. Imagine that for a moment, because it's a total of 1,000 years that Irish people have been subjected by British domination. That means that the Irish have been colonized by the British, no different than the fact that the British colonized, as I just said, large parts of Africa, which is the only reason that some of us even speak English today. Because of that fact, and because they went over there and colonized us, even though we are African, this is the reason that some of us speak English, as well as the Western Hemisphere. So we have to remember that it's our responsibility to continue to acknowledge that we want to work side by side with people who are experiencing colonization, because larger numbers help to deconstruct systems of oppression. Next slide, please. Like all movements against injustice, there are many tendencies within the Irish liberation struggle. The tendency most well known in the West, although mostly distorted, is that of the Irish Republican Army and Sinn Féin, its political wing. Although larger and longer in its activism, we will focus instead on the socialist tendencies within the Irish Republican movement. In 1974, the Irish Republican Socialist Party, IRSP, was founded, and also its armed wing, the Irish National Liberation Army. Unlike the IRA and Sinn Féin, the IRSP and the IRNA focused their organizing energies into fighting for socialist revolution. The IRSP has since itself engaged in line struggles around direction. And for us, we give recognition and respect to our comrades in the Irish Republican Socialist Network of North America and their continued work to highlight socialist revolution in Ireland and the ideology of James Connolly as a guiding light in their fight. And so, again, my comrades, I encourage you next year when you join ALD and you hear from some of our comrades from the Irish Socialist Party, don't frown up your face and question why is it a Pan-African event, but you're hearing from some European white people. Remember that their fight is similar to ours. And as I've just said to you, since I was born, so that's at least 3 decades, they have been speaking at our events because they understand what happened to Africa was a travesty. And they have chosen to speak and give a specific message of solidarity to us at ALD since I can literally remember. So we have to understand that some of us still are not doing as much as we can to end systems of oppression. And for those of us who are African, but we are not in organizations, for those of us that are African and we are complaining about the situations, but not quote unquote doing anything about it, which would be joining an organization that works for justice, then it would be really hypocritical and also out of pocket for you to critique our comrades from the Irish Socialist Republican Party because they are an organization, but yet you are not. And so I just would question you and encourage you to have some humility, comrades, when we really, really think about it. As I just said, for the past 1,000 years, they have been resisting domination. So I just think that it's important that we acknowledge, okay, first of all, they're going through some stuff, okay? And second of all, let's join hands. Let's make the fight bigger. We need as many people on deck. We can't take down capitalism by ourselves. Even if every African in the whole part of the world did that, it still wouldn't be enough. This is why we need the indigenous people. This is why we need the Asian people. This is why we need Palestinians. This is why we need LGBTQ. This is why we need differently abled. This is why we need femme identifying people. We need every single person who understands what oppression is like, because the more people who understand it and want to take it down, the more likelihood our probability is that we will not only win, but we will secure outcomes that work for all those same groups of people that I said. The Palestinians will get their land back, the indigenous people will get their land back, the Africans will get our land back, and our Irish family will get their land back. And so I close by encouraging you to just consider, especially with this time of year, capitalism is working overtime to get your money right now. So instead of going to Old Navy or Kohl's or Bed Bath and Beyond or whatever your store of choice is that you like to spend money, consider joining an organization, or at least consider donating that same money you would use to buy at Old Navy, donating it to a Pan-African or a Irish Socialist Republican Party organization. Because I guarantee you the money going to the organization, specifically a socialist organization, probably going to have a better chance of impacting a larger number of people versus a pair of jeans that you might buy at Old Navy. No disrespect, family. I'm just trying to remind us that we have serious work to do. Join an organization working for justice, and y'all stay safe out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shakura. Thank you, as always, for the foundation that you provide us on our topics every week. This is very good, and I just want to build on it if I can, and start by saying that when we say we support, as African revolutionaries, the Irish Republican Socialist Struggle, what we're saying, you all, is we're revolutionaries. We are not trying to reform the capitalist system. We want to destroy it and create something better. We already told you, our objective is one unified peace and justice. And so we want revolution. And the definition of revolution is uncompromising change, uncompromising change. And so that just means we want to take a backward system, the international capitalist imperialist system. We want to destroy it, and we want to create a worldwide socialist revolution, leading to world communism. And I know that's a lot for you all because you've been we've all been propagandized by capitalist misinformation, but that's what we're trying to do. And I have to say that because it differentiates us from people who don't have that objective. So we're revolutionaries. And so what that means is our work can never be based on sentimentality. It can never be based on sentimentality. It can never be based on emotional fantasies about how we win. It has to be based on science. And that science is that we recognize that as many blows as we can strike against the enemy, we're going to strike them. We're going to strike as many blows as we can strike against the enemy. And we don't need people to tell us, well, Irish people are racist against African people, because I already know that's how people are going to respond to this session today. Irish people are racist against that. Like, people say that to us like we don't know that, right? Like, I mean, I remember our comrades Shakura mentioned in the Irish Republican Socialist Network of North America. They have huge St. Patrick's Day parades in San Francisco, California. 500,000-600,000 people are at those parades. And if you know, these types of parades are not political. They promote the reactionary propaganda of the green leprechaun and green beer and all that nonsense. But what our comrades did is they had a contingent every year in that parade, and several of us in the All African People's Revolutionary Party would march with them. And so one of the years we were marching with them, people were drinking. And so this guy comes out towards the parade where we're marching, and he says, what part of Ireland, talking to us, talking to the Africans, what part of Ireland are you all from? The same part as Shaquille O'Neal? And, like 300 or 400 people cracked up laughing. So, we get it. We already understand, you all, that consciousness in this capitalist empire is low. The bar is low. We understand that. But the difference between us and a lot of people is we don't confuse that for what needs to be done in order for us to have justice. And so what we're saying is that we're looking at a scientific formula for how we can be successful in defeating our enemy. And what we have found is there is not a single force on earth here today that has been colonized longer by the British than the Irish people. And since they did that, they built off of their strength of colonizing within the United Kingdom and expanded out and expanded their reach to Africa, to Asia, to all of the Americas. And that's what they did. And so when you hear talk today, they used to have a saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire, because they had colonies all over the world. And so when you hear talk today about Hong Kong, like this clown in the National Basketball Association, this player, Enos Cantor, he's trying to make a name for himself. He just became a US citizen last week. And in one of the games, he wore a jersey saying freedom, like the confused message that becoming an American represents freedom, which is, absolutely absurd. And he's criticizing LeBron James because LeBron James, the player, has not come out and criticized the Chinese government. And the problem with that, you all, is that people, you ain't studied nothing about no China. Okay, you don't know nothing about China. If the European capitalist system hasn't told you about China, you don't know nothing about China. You have read not one book about China. So we're not going to pretend that we're having an informed conversation about what's happening in China, because if we have an informed conversation, we would have to talk about the fact that Hong Kong was colonized by the British away from China. And when China had its revolution, has built its capacity, and it's now one of the world powers, they're pushing for their territories back. Hong Kong is a colonized part of their territory that Britain stole from them. Taiwan is a part of their territory that Britain stole from them. Or that not Britain, but that was created by the Kuomintang, who were the people who were defeated during the Chinese Revolution in 1949. And there are a couple of other territories that China's trying to rightfully, whether you agree with China or whatever your position is on China, even though you haven't studied China, whatever your position is, they have a right to regain their territories. And a lot of the so-called conflict that you see happening in China, in Hong Kong, the so-called strike that this idiot basketball player, Enes Kanter, is criticizing LeBron James about, is based in the fact that these capitalists in Hong Kong don't want to fulfill their agreement to return Hong Kong to China. So they're fomenting these protests that aren't really real, that the real activists on the ground, like the Amalgamated Workers Union in Hong Kong, 600,000 workers are not even supporting these so-called protests. They're supposed to be being carried out to create better working conditions for the people in Hong Kong. So that should tell you something right there about what's really happening, is that these protests are being funded by right-wing groups in this backward country. They're being supported by backward racist white supremacist groups like the Proud Boys, for example. And they're trying to convince you that China's an oppressive government and that these people are fighting for freedom. The same way they're doing the same thing in Cuba to try to undermine the Cuban Revolution. So we know that Britain is a fascist dictatorship of colonization and oppression against humanity. So we understand that the stronger the Irish people can get in fighting against Britain imperialism, that makes Britain imperialism that much weaker, because we got to deal with Britain imperialism, because Britain imperialism is all over Africa. They control all of the oil production that comes out of Nigeria because they've colonized Nigeria. They control Royal Dutch Shell is partially based in Britain. They control the production of oil that comes out of Nigeria. They control everything that happens in Kenya, in Tanzania, in all of the countries, all of the areas in Africa, Azania, South Africa, as you call South Africa, Zimbabwe, all the diamond production. De Beers Corporation, which was initiated by Cecil Rhodes over 100 years ago, controls all the diamond theft and gold theft. Palestine, that nasty Zionist state of Israel, so that they can produce 40% of the polished diamonds in the world. So we have nothing good to say about Britain, and anybody that is fighting against Britain is a friend of ours. And the Irish people have been fighting against Britain longer than anybody else on earth. As Pan-Africanist revolutionaries, we're not trying, again, to create some kind of niche within the capitalist system. We're fighting. I know a lot of you are. You're trying to find some comfort level within the capitalist system. So when we talk and the work we do makes absolutely no sense to you, and I get that, but just be honest, because you really don't know much about the work that we're doing. You really know virtually nothing about it. And so what we're trying to say to you is that our work is in creating a worldwide fighting force of African people to liberate Africa. And the more blows the Irish people make against Britain, it creates a better effort, better conditions for us to strike our blows against Britain. The more the Palestinian people fight against Britain, because it was Britain that declared the Balfour Declaration in 1917 rather, sorry, that supposedly officially gave Palestine away from the Palestinian people to the Zionists, who you call Jews, that run the state of Israel. So again, Britain is an enemy of all of humanity. And so any blows the Palestinian people can strike against Britain, occupied Palestine, Israel, is a blow against Britain. And it helps what we're trying to do in liberating Africa and fighting for African liberation. So we don't worry about, well, Irish people are racist against African people. Everybody's racist against African people, including many Africans are racist against African people. African people uphold white supremacy against African people as well as anybody else. So we're scientific, you all, in our analysis. We're not sentimental. We're revolutionaries. So we don't worry about, well, these people are racist against African people, because we know that we are going to be successful, which means Africa will be free. And when Africa is free, we will no longer have to ask anybody on earth for anything. We won't have to beg these people for jobs. We won't have to beg these people for humanity, for justice. We won't have to beg them for a damn thing. They will have to come to us and beg us for oil, beg us for uranium, beg us for coltan to run through these devices so they can communicate and have an internet. They will have to beg us for automobiles. So once we have that reality, we no longer have to worry about what people think about us. That'll become completely irrelevant. So even if every single Irish person on earth was racist against African people, we would still pull for them in their fight against British imperialism, because that's getting us closer to Pan-Africanism. And we know Pan-Africanism is all we need to solve all the problems that we have. I know that's a lot. I know it's like knocking people out, but that should be evidence for you that you're like, dang, I got work to do to understand this situation deeper than just, well, those people don't like us. They look at us, they treat us bad. I mean, who treats us well? Who treats African people well? Nobody. And that will never be our reality until we have. And I've got news for you all. That's not going to ever happen until Africa is free. You can elect as many Negroes to as many offices as you want. We are never going to have that until Africa is free. And we are never confused about this. We know that every blow against this imperialist system benefits us as African people. Every blow the Palestinians take benefits us. Every blow the Irish people take benefits us. Every blow the indigenous people take benefits us. Every blow the Filipino people take benefits us. Every blow the Maori people take benefits us. And every blow we take benefits all of them. So that's why it just makes sense for us to have an understanding of their struggle, a comprehensive understanding, and to support it. It doesn't take anything from us to do that, but it does help us to help our people understand that these people in Ireland fighting for a Republican Socialist society are doing nothing to hurt us as African people. In fact, every step they get closer to their goal helps us get closer to our goal. That's important. We understand that. So when we talk about Irish Republican fighters like James Connolly, in the picture there, James Connolly was one of the spiritual and ideological leaders of the Irish Republican Socialist movement. He was an Irish Marxist. I've read some of his writings, and I think that a lot of what he contributed was essential, because here was a man from Europe who was a socialist and also coming from a colonized country, Ireland, who talked about Marxist Leninist theory. And I think his writings, James Connolly's writings, were more helpful for me in terms of understanding Marxist Leninist theory than anything that I've read from Marx and Lenin. And in the AAPRP, we read a lot from Marx and Lenin, but we also read James Connolly because he comes from that European, colonized European Marxist Leninist socialist perspective. So I strongly encourage you, if this is your first time ever hearing anything about James Connolly, that you check that out. And he was also a member of the International Workers of the World, which is the most revolutionary and progressive labor union on the planet Earth, and always has been. And I say that working through pawns for the capitalist system, but the International Workers of the World, or Wobblies as they're called, are actual people who are fighting for a real worker state. And James Connolly's ideas, whether it's stated or not, have been very influential in the overall worker struggle, even in this backward country. That's been true. So you should look at people like James Connolly, because his ideas are essential and centered in the direction of the struggle for Irish Republican socialism in Ireland. And for people, if you don't know anything, if you never heard of James Connolly, but you're going to argue with us about the Irish struggle against colonialism, I mean, come on, that's absurd. Like, I'm not going to do that. You know, that's the first thing I'm gonna ask you. Someone messaged me this week, well, why are you all talking about white people? And I'm like, well, what do you know about the Irish struggle? Well, I know they don't like black people. I'm like, that doesn't tell me anything about the Irish struggle. What do you know? I mean, you probably don't even like black people. I mean, that doesn't mean anything to me. You know, what's the definition of liking black people, quote unquote? And this person said, well, it's starting business. I'm like, yeah, you definitely don't like our people, because that clearly is not the solution to the conditions of African people anywhere on earth. That's just a methodology for you to try to create some revenue for yourself. And I'm not against that, because you need to have revenue for yourself, but you are not talking to an idiot here. So telling me that, I know instantly that you are not thinking about the collective liberation of the masses of our people. And since you're not thinking about that, you're just thinking about how you can create a revenue stream for yourself, which is fine, but I'm not going to in this concept on that level. You don't have the capacity right now to understand why it makes sense for us to look at these other struggles and understand how connecting with them makes us stronger and brings us that much closer to victory. That's a very important thing we have to understand. And for those people that say, well, these people never did anything for us, like, come on. I mean, step up your game some, like get some intellectual capacity in your process and stop being so satisfied and knowing nothing and saying nothing. Because if you knew that, like, again, I mean, I've said this a million times, I'll say it a million more. We are engaged in this work. We're not just sitting around reading social media articles all day. So because we're engaged in this work, like Shakur said, she's spent time around Irish Republican Socialist organizers and fighters, people that have been on the ground in Ireland supporting the struggle for their liberation. And so because we interact with people like that, we have the benefit. And you're not going to get it from CNN or MSNBC or Fox or CIA network. So if you're not engaged in the work, you're never going to really understand what fuels this work. Example, what I'm talking about. There was a time, sometime in the 1990s, where I think it was right after the LA Rebellion in Los Angeles. And the Irish comrades indicated to us that they wanted to meet. I don't remember the exact story, it was almost 30 years ago. But we had a session with them, and they provided us with paintings. And these paintings were painted by Irish Republican prisoners of war in prison in Ireland. And these paintings were of African liberation fighters like Kwame Ture and Huey P. Newton. And the prisoners in Ireland wanted to convey to us, African revolutionaries, that they were in prison in Ireland and they were thinking about our struggle, our fight. And so this was, for me as a young man, highly inspirational that some people clear across the world who were incarcerated would see the necessity to create a message of solidarity with us. I'm just a poor Black boy from the ghetto in San Francisco. These people all the way across the world want to express solidarity with our struggle. And so that's when I began to understand in much clearer terms how important a simple message of solidarity can be, how a simple message can inspire an entire people. I mean, that was essential. I don't even know the names of the people incarcerated. I don't even know if they're still among us, but I know that that effort that they made has made what had such an impact on not just me, but all of us, because it demonstrated that people are paying attention and people know that this system is unjust and people want to do something about it. That's very important. So there's also been many examples, too numerous to cite here, where, you know, the Irish Republican Socialist movement has engaged in direct support for African liberation efforts, especially when you talk about the struggle against racist apartheid in Azania, what you call by the colonial name South Africa. And there are numerous examples were all phases of the Irish Republican Irish Republican movement, where we're talking about the Irish Republican Socialist movement, or whether we're talking about Sinn Féin and the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, where they engaged in material support. I'm talking about providing weapons, providing resources, providing training to our comrades in our African liberation organization, specifically the African National Congress, when they were a legitimate liberation movement fighting against the apartheid regime in Azania, what you call South Africa. So these people have provided material support to our struggle. So they have nothing that they have to prove about their legitimacy as revolutionaries. And I remember, Shakur mentioned our comrade, Brother Peter. And I remember years ago, he spoke at one of our events, and our events are African. We're organizing our people. So they were African people. And we would invite Palestinian speakers to educate our people. We'd invite indigenous. We'd always have somebody from the indigenous organization community come and educate our people. And we would have our comrades from the Irish Republican Socialist movement do the same. And so one of the events, somebody from the audience was questioning, what are you gonna do about racism in the US? And the comrade explained to the people that, don't see me because I'm white and, equate me with every white person in America. We're fighting a liberation struggle, and I understood exactly what he was trying to say. I don't think the person raising the question understood, because they didn't know anything about it, and they didn't really want to know anything about it. But I understood that what the response was saying is that our contribution is by fighting to eliminate this capitalist imperialist system. And a simple-minded understanding is that when you're white, so you're a part of the white supremacist system. Okay, well, we're all a part of the white supremacist system. And I would even go as far as to say, if system, then you are perpetuating white supremacy. I don't care how you can be as black as the pavement. You are perpetuating white supremacy. I will believe that until I go to my grave. So it's not enough to say, well, just my skin is black, so I therefore have the right to challenge and question who everybody else is in this society. No, it has to require a much higher scientific understanding of the forces at work here, and understanding that we will always have some people who don't look like us who can be some of our best friends. And we will also always have people who look just like us who are our worst enemies. And I'm here to tell you, if you didn't know, there are plenty of African people, black people, as most of you would call it, who are the enemies of African people everywhere on earth. People that work in this government. Y'all to sit there a couple months ago, rest in peace, Colin Powell. Colin Powell was an enemy of African people. Yes, he looked like us, but we're not that stupid. We know that he could look like us and also lead an invasion into Libya, Africa, which he did. He can look like us and also lead an invasion into Grenada, an African country, which he did. He can look like us and lead an invasion into Panama, a country dominated by African people, which he did. So he can look like us and still be responsible for the death, destruction, and suffering of hundreds of thousands of African people, or black people, as you may want to understand who we're talking about. So just because he looks like us, that is not enough for us to say that, well, then we're in alliance with him. We're not in alliance with him. He's the enemy of humanity. He's certainly the enemy of African people. So we're sophisticated enough. We're politically sophisticated enough to understand that we have friends that don't look like us, that don't come from where we come from. And we have enemies that live right in our house. And we are not ever going to be shy about saying that. This is about class war. And there are plenty of Africans who line up every day with the capitalist system against the interests of our people all over the world. All we care about is our lives, what's happening with us. We don't care anything about how our tax dollars go for murder and mass destruction around the planet. And we sit here and celebrate a Veterans Day, celebrating the death and murder of millions of people around the planet, and then you want to talk about, well, they don't like us in those countries. They should chop their head off when you go in those countries. They had every right to do that because they have seen the Apache helicopters funded by your tax dollars that came and caused death and destruction to them. They have seen the AR-15s kill their loved ones funded by your tax dollars that come to their countries, and you didn't even have enough concern for that to even understand what was happening to these people. And so as far as I'm concerned, they have a right to do whatever they want to do to you. They don't do anything because that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to seek justice, you all. And so we've got to wake up and start to get an understanding of worthless analysis of what's happening in the world because it serves our individual interests. We have to develop much more of an objective understanding of the world that we live in. It's essential that we do that. So some of the tangible takeaways that we want to express as it relates to the struggle for Irish Republican socialism, we want to refer to the comment made by Comrade Huey P. Newton, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, of course. And Brother Huey said, no participation, no right to observation. In other words, if you didn't go to school and study physics, you can't talk about physics. You could think you're talking about physics, but you're not talking about physics. You're talking about whatever bourgeois confusion is in your head. If you don't play football, you can talk about football. You can watch a million games of football on TV, but you don't really understand football because you've never actually participated in the activity. If you don't paint, you could talk about painting, but you don't really understand painting because you've never engaged in the process to understand what it takes to paint. If you don't write, you can talk about writing, but if you've never engaged in the process, you don't understand what it takes to write. If you are not involved in the struggle, if you sit behind your computer and just argue with people all the time, but you're not accountable to anybody other than yourself, then you do not understand what's required to fight for freedom and liberation. You think you do, you think you understand it, but you don't understand it. You're not even accountable to anybody beyond yourself. So how can you understand it? Because the whole point of engaging in the struggle is that you are making a commitment to humanity over and beyond just committing to yourself and your biological family. You're doing that, but you're taking an extra step to build beyond that. And if you don't do that, you don't understand what it takes to take that extra step. You think you do, but you don't understand. And so this is what Huey is saying. If you're not participating, you don't have a right to make an observation about it. Your observation is useless. I experience this all day. People try to tell me about the struggle for liberation and they're not involved in it. Why would I listen to you? I mean, that would be insane for me to listen to you. And a lot of you listen to these celebrities. Kanye West talks about the struggle. Lil Wayne talks, what the hell do these people know about our struggle for liberation? These people know less than their minus knowledge about our people's struggle. But a lot of us can't wait to hear what they have to say. I can tell you already, whatever they have to say is going to be absurd because they don't know anything about it. It would be like me going to them trying to talk about what it takes to make a hip hop album. I don't know anything about that. I've never done it. So I'm going to listen to them because I'm not that egotistical. But every day people are so egotistical. You think you understand the struggle. You don't know anything about it. Huey P. Newton was actually absolutely correct. You don't know anything about the struggle if you're not participating in it. That's the first takeaway. Second takeaway, that our struggle as African people is a worldwide struggle, you all. I know that most of us in the US, all we know is what's happening in the US, and we really don't know what's happening in the US, but all we think we know is what's happening in the US. But it's important that we come to understand that our problem did not start in the US. So it will never be able to be solved in the US. How are you going to solve a problem here when it's a worldwide problem? That's why we don't make any progress here, because we don't understand it. We make symbolic progress. We make progress for individuals. Individuals make progress, but as a collective people, I would argue we've gone backwards as a collective people. Yeah, you got Negroes in individual positions of power, but that does nothing to serve the interests of the masses of the people. So that's worthless. You have symbols of progress. You have people you can look at and say, well, yeah, they serve the master at a closer position. Like that's something to be proud of. Like that's insane. And no free thinking people would be pleased with just having Negroes that sit under the master's table and can catch his crumbs quicker and talking about that's progress. That's not nothing but a more advanced term or servitude, or what I call capitalism and white supremacy and blackface. That's all that is. That's all Kamala Harris is capitalism and blackface. That's all these people are. So we can't be influenced by that. Again, we're not sentimental. We're revolutionaries. We can't be influenced by all that nonsense. We passed that stage years ago. So we're talking about something on a much deeper level. Our struggle is worldwide. So the only way we'll properly understand it is by developing an international consciousness, by developing an international consciousness, by understanding the things that are happening in the world and what those things, how those things impact us. And so that's why we have to understand different struggles. We have to have a comprehensive understanding of different struggles, because those struggles impact us, and what we do impacts them. And so that understanding helps us become that much better prepared, and the better prepared we are, the closer we can come to victory. That's why we do that. That's why we do that. We don't support the Irish Republican Socialist Struggle because we have some sick fetish about becoming white. Like that's other people's dysfunctional stuff. If that's where they're at, like they can't even interact positively with European people because they feel like, you know, that there's some kind of psychological oppression. But like, we don't have that. Our struggle is totally independent. Our Pan-African struggle is completely independent. We don't request anything from anybody else. Everything we have, everything we use comes from the masses of our people. And so if every non-African on earth today said we are going to do nothing to support the Pan-African struggle, that would do nothing to stop us from achieving our objective. We are going to achieve our objective because our movement is based on organizing the African masses for Pan-Africanism. The only thing that happens when we connect with these other struggles is we get stronger, and we lose nothing. I can tell you, we've lost nothing by supporting the Irish Republican Socialist Struggle. In fact, all it's done, just speaking for myself, is give me further strength, more strength. Because when the Irish Republican Socialist comrades talked years ago about how British imperialism oppresses them by doing everything imperialism does, controlling their borders, controlling their governments, controlling their institutions, controlling their economy, all of those things are standard fare in imperialism. But they talked about the methodologies of oppression. And they talked about how the youth in Dublin are prevented from speaking Celtic, for example, which is the language the Irish people speak, and if they're wearing Irish clothing or singing Irish songs, the police repress them. And that had a resounding impact on me, because y'all Africans know that's our experience being oppressed by capitalism in all the countries we live, where we exist under that around the world, is that they attack our culture, because our enemies understand that the way you control the people is by repressing their culture. That's why they repress African culture to the brutal degree that they do. This is the reason why you don't know anything about Africa. You don't know anything about your culture. You don't know anything about who you are. That's the reason, because they know that if they can repress your culture and convince you that you're American, then they will forever have you following behind them, trying to be accepted by them, something they will never do. But they will always have you waiting for that to happen. And if you're waiting for that to happen, you're never going to take any steps to liberate yourself from them and fight against them and overthrow them so you can create something better. So hearing that about the Irish people and how they repress their culture resonated sharply with us. And by understanding that and understanding the same thing happens to the Palestinian people, their culture is repressed. And schools that they forced the indigenous people to go to, and how they forced them to, they couldn't speak their indigenous languages. They had to speak English, and they had to do these things. It really helped me understand better how the system works, how imperialism works. So it's important to understand that, because that's, if you understand that, then it gives you the keys for, again, how we get free. Okay. And then from any, this is just basic strategy, right? From any strategic and tactical standpoint, it always makes sense to strengthen your struggle. So if you are in a house and there's an enemy in front of the house and they're firing weapons at you, and there are 10 people in the house, they're firing weapons from you. If we listen to the logic of these people that tell us, well, don't have any relationship with any other movement, all we can do is be concerned about African people. If we listen to that logic, then that logic, using the metaphor that I'm using, would equate to all of us run out the front door together against the enemy. That gives the enemy a clear pathway to eliminate as many, if not all of us, as they can. From a strategic standpoint, it makes perfect sense that we would say, well, the 10 of us, a couple of us can dig under the house and try to come up out of the ground behind the enemy. A couple more of us can go on the roof and try to attack the enemy from the roof. Maybe a couple of us can come out and fire from the porch. Yeah, but some of us can go out the back door and try to go around and get to the enemy. That just makes sense from a strategic standpoint. So when we say that we have support for the Irish struggle, for the Palestinian struggle, for the indigenous struggle, this is what we're saying, is that it makes sense for us to attack the enemy from all different angles. And it also relates to our understanding of even reform struggle within the capitalist system. So, for example, in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, you have never heard us, even though a lot of people try to hear it, you never heard us say, well, you shouldn't vote. We don't tell you not to vote. You never hear us. We just tell you we're not participating in it. And a lot of you, because you probably have questions yourself about why you're doing it, when we tell you that, then you start, well, why am I doing it? So you feel attacked. So you feel like you have to respond to us. We never questioned you about what you're doing. We just give analysis to what the system is about. So when we talk about voting, we don't tell you not to do it. We just say you should build a movement so you can have force behind your voting process. We just say that it doesn't make sense to us that your entire strategy is voting for crackers to solve our problems, or voting for Negroes that think and act like crackers to solve our problems. That's insane to us that that's your strategy. And then even when you elect these people, you couldn't even explain to us how you hold them accountable to our interests. This man now, it's the same thing all the time. Well, Biden, it's the most important election ever. We got to get Biden elected. If you don't elect for him, you're betraying our ancestors. We're tired of hearing that nonsense. And then you elect this clown, and everybody gets amnesia after that. Like, now you don't understand, like, you got nothing. What has he done for you? Nothing. He hasn't done anything for you. And you can't even say how you can force him to do anything because you have no movement to hold him accountable. And so that's your strategy. That's your tactics. Like, what are you getting from him? Like, he has done nothing. He didn't even what he said he would do. Like, the moratorium on, when he was campaigning, he talked about he would create a moratorium on eliminating student loan debt. I want any student who's had their debt eliminated by this clown to please call us out and tell us we don't know what we're talking about. He said when he was campaigning that they would consider a moratorium on reparations. Now, if you believe anybody that, I mean, if you believe, I shouldn't even have to say any, come on, y'all. I shouldn't have to say any more about this. Like, they're gaming us. It's a game. And, you know, the saying, fool me once, it's your fault. Fool me twice, it's my fault. We continue to be gamed by this system. Then they should game us. They should come out in white sheets and hoods and say, we want you ends you better vote for us and we're going to lynch you up. And they should just say that, because that's really what they're doing. Behind closed doors, that's what they do to us anyway. So it's important to understand that from a strategic standpoint, it always makes sense to attack your enemy from as many angles as possible. So those of you who say, well, we're going to attack him in the Democratic Party, we'll get you a movement and do that. Because you people that believe that should be the most ardent supporters of revolutionary Pan-Africanists. Because one of the things Dr. Martin Luther King, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Whitney Young, and the Urban League, and Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, one of the things they agreed and they understood clearly about in the 1960s is that when Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam arose, and later on Huey P. Newton, Bobby Seale, and the Black Panther Party, all that did was make what they were talking about sound that much easier to make come into existence. Because it's documented that Dr. Martin Luther King, when he was meeting with John F. Kennedy and meeting with Lyndon Johnson, he said, look, he told Lyndon Johnson, I in urban rebellions, but he was a smart enough tactician to understand that he could use the people who are in the streets engaging in tactics that he didn't even agree with to advance his agenda of civil rights. So this is what we're saying, is that it just makes sense for us to have that type of broadened consciousness. The Irish struggle and every step they make towards victory helps the African masses. Whether you know it or not is irrelevant and doesn't change that reality. Whether you believe it or not is irrelevant and does not change that reality. Objectively, this is true because we're fighting for revolution, and revolution is based on objective scientific principles. It's not based on what you want to believe or the unsolved trauma that you have. It's based on objective and scientific principles. And of course, it's based in class struggle. So since we understand that, we know that our primary struggle is against the capitalist system. And we're not saying that if we change, if you say, oh God, give me a headache. Well, he said it was capitalism, it's not racist. I mean, you know, if somebody says that, they're just not listening. They're just not, and they don't want to know, because nobody is more outspoken and more militant against white supremacy than we are. So we've said a million times that the body, the brain, is capitalism and imperialism. The arms and legs are white supremacy, patriarchy, homophobia, etc., and so forth. So these are the appendages of the capitalist system. That's what's meant when we say the way that when you have a racist experience, it's because of capitalism. So that's what we mean when we say revolution is class struggle. Not saying that white supremacy is subverted to the struggle against capitalism, not saying that the struggle against capitalism is subverted when you're dealing with white supremacy. It's saying that you will never have an elimination of white supremacy until you deal with capitalism. That's why we say Pan-Africanism, because we need Africa, that's part of it, but we also need socialism. That's why we say one unified socialist Africa. Ireland must. As always, we appreciate you joining us for this hour. We want to ask you to join us next week, Sunday, December 12th, same time. We're going to expand on today. We're going to talk about the value of international solidarity. We're trying to really attack this myopic micro-nationalism within the African community. We want to help people understand that these supporting broader struggles, expanding your knowledge and work, does nothing to take anything away from you. It just makes you stronger. So we want to expand upon that to talk about all struggles that are not African and why we support them and how supporting them helps us. We want to talk about that. And we also want you to go to our shop, support independent, revolutionary, Pan-African organizations. I see a lot of you, you're posting pictures. It's beautiful. We really appreciate you doing that. Go to the shop. There's the link there and get your hoodie, your t-shirt, all the materials there. We appreciate that. We're trying to build independent, revolutionary organization, and we have to supply funds to our comrades in Africa. And when you buy from our store, you're contributing to that work. So thank you. So you don't have to wait for no late night imperialist program. Send 88 cents, feed this child in Somalia. Go to the store and buy some, and then you can really help African people achieve self-determination. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aaprp-intl.org and join our party. Participate in our party. There'll be an information video there that you can watch, and you can go ahead and check that out, and then you'll be connected with an organizer, and we will get to work. Go to abetterworld.me. All of these videos are housed there. I told you, these are 89th, 89. They're all there at abetterworld.me. So you can look at something a year ago, a year and a half ago, and there's all kind of topics. So go check it out. Just go there and peruse and see what the videos are and check them out. Don't be wasting. For the Hood Communist Collective. So support Hood Communists, another entity that supports revolutionary African forces. We just had our comrade Salifu Mack, who went to Cuba with Pastors for Peace and gave a report, an outstanding report of the socialist revolution in Cuba. So you should check that out. You can go to Hood Communist and check it out. He's written there about visiting the Fidel Castro Museum. So check out that site and see what Comrade Salifu was written about. Stop listening to what the New York Times has to say or the LA Times about socialist Cuba. That you're never going to know anything if that's where you're getting your information, or CNN or any of those other idiots. And then on the bottom, we have all of the broadcasts that we participate in every consistently. Pantula, the Revolutionary African Women, Forward Ever broadcast, our comrades in New Mexico, the newscast every Thursday, and you can see the times there. Please participate, support all of these entities. It's very important. We need your support. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. My book, please continue to buy it. We are organizing groups all over the country. Would love to hear from you if you're reading the book, as people are reaching out and doing. And we're doing community defense work. We had a wonderful session here yesterday where we talked about what you do when you're stopped by the police. How do you plan for that to happen, and what you do when it happens? So we have a lot of positive work going on. So support the book, because that's how we fund this work. And so we appreciate all of you. We're glad you're here today. We want to tell you to enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon. And please remember that it's important that we fight against injustice. So we are organizing constantly, one unified socialist Africa, organized for African revolution, support all people who are fighting against injustice, no matter where they are on the planet Earth. Forward ever, backwards never. Smash patriarchy, smash capitalism, smash homophobia. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.